John Smith here presenting Bonnie Gordon. Who are you? Who are you beyond your physical traits, beyond your personality and beliefs? Who are you beyond your titles, degrees, talents, and past experiences? Underneath, all of that is temporary, and changing is your infinite divine magnificence, your true God self. The same divine essence that dwells within all the ascended masters, Buddha, Christ, Krishna. Our speaker today will be sharing a story of how she opened more deeply to her true self and continues to do so. She is an ordained minister, shaman Reiki master, licensed massage therapist, yoga instructor, and author and speaker. Let's give a warm welcome to Bonnie Gordon.
Thank you, everyone. How's everyone doing today?
Great.
Great. Everyone enjoying the expo? Yes? This is a great event. I'm grateful for it. Christiana wanted us to all have some sort of service or some sort of product to offer after our talk. And at the time, I didn't have one. But in the last few weeks, I produced this book. So it is A Love Affair with a Billionaire. It's by me. My pen name is Ananda Joy. And it is a fiction based and inspired by a true story. So, and I am offering them for $10 today if you'd like a copy afterwards. And I will sign one if you like. It's about half price if you get it through Amazon. It's $15.99, and then you got to pay taxes and shipping and all that. So if you are interested, it's a great story, a great love story. So that is what is here. So I'd like to talk about something that is very dear to my heart, and it is about loving and losing a beloved soulmate. And I'm going to use the fictional name that's in the book, because all the names have been changed, and his name is Matthew. And the joy in loving him and the grief in losing him has made me a better human being. We're all born into this world feeling fully safe and completely loved. We're full of self-expression. Have you ever seen a little child get upset? They hold nothing back. They're screaming one moment, and then they're laughing and giggling the next. Little children are full of wonder. I'll never forget when my daughter discovered an ant for the very first time. She sat on our patio, it was springtime, in her little diaper, mesmerized by this tiny little creature. Or when my son first discovered that water came out of a garden hose. The garden hose truly was his favorite toy that whole summer. He watered all my flowers for me. Even when the water wasn't on, he would be putting it in the bottles. It's so cute. And then it seems like life happens. And for many of us, we close down a little bit, some of that self-expression. We get hurt. We get a little frightened by life. We might even put a little bit of armor around our hearts to protect ourselves from some of those threatening and people and circumstances that life can entail. And that happened to me. And it all began when I was 3 years old. My sister, who was my big sister, she was 6. She brought me along to her friend's house, and I was sitting in her friend's front yard, peaceful and content, to just twist my little finger into the earth. The sky was blue, and the birds were chirping, and everything was perfect in the universe. Until my sister's friend screamed, "Bonnie, you have ruined our yard. When my father sees that hole you made in our yard, he is going to kill you." Well, I took her quite literally, and I was terrified. So I ran home through the woods as fast as my 3-year-old legs could take me. I hid under my bed, and I wouldn't come out. My mother had to crawl under my tiny little 3-year-old bed and drag me out. Then there was a time where I was at that ice hockey rink. My brother was practicing hockey, and I was bored to tears. I sat in the rink, and I spotted a couple kids that looked about my age, maybe about 4 years old, 5 years old, and my heart just leaped for joy. I just thought, oh, friends I can play with. And so I waved and I smiled, waiting for a response. Well, they gave me a response, all right. They stuck their tongues out at me and made mean faces. And I was crushed. I just burrowed my face into my mother's side and I cried. My mother had an illness that hospitalized her every 2 to 3 years. And she was gone 6 months, sometimes a year. And I didn't always feel safe with the strangers my father hired to replace my mother. I missed my mommy. I didn't understand why she had gone away. Then there was my friendship trauma. Has anybody here ever had an experience, a difficult experience in losing a friend? Just raise your hand. Yeah. It's hard to get through life without having a friendship trauma. Mine was in the 6th grade. Janie and I had been best friends since the 2nd grade. And the last week of 6th grade, she decided to make a new best friend. And she didn't want to be my friend anymore. So by the time I had met Matthew, I was in my 30s. I was raising my 2 children by myself, and I was working 7 days a week to run my business, and life had seemed more about survival and fear than wonder and grace. But the 7 years of life experiences with Matthew transformed who I am. It wasn't the experiences themselves. It was the love that infused those experiences that altered who I am at the very core of my being. You see, he loved me so completely, so unconditionally, that for the first time since I was 3 years old, I felt safe on the planet. His love helped me heal ancient wounds I didn't even know I had. His wonderful male protector provider energy allowed me to more fully embrace my feminine side. His love was a safe haven. I could be myself. He loved and accepted me exactly as I am, flaws, faults, weaknesses included. His love was the fertile ground that allowed me to bloom into the woman I am today. And I am still blooming. There is still so much I have to learn, so much I have to discover. Matthew was not an ordinary man. His mind was creative and ingenious, and it was just working overtime all the time. I'd spend a lot of time at his house, and he was always redecorating or reorganizing something. And it really did seem every 2 weeks, all the pictures on all the walls were rearranged, completely rearranged. He was always looking for a better way to do things, creative ways to make a difference. He lived outside the box. He took every class I taught. One particular class, I had instructed everybody to go outside and make a sand painting. A sand painting is a shamanic exercise where you make a circle in the ground and you put things from nature like sticks and stones inside that circle to represent things you want to manifest in your life. Well, he called me over to see his sand painting. It's the best, he said. Well, it was not exactly what I had instructed. He thought on a higher level, just like his sand painting. It was up in a tree. Perched between 2 branches, it was a teepee-looking masterpiece. Feathers coming out the top. Berries and flowers decorated the outside. Inside, there was like a stick of stone inside, but there was also stamps and coins and candies. Even had a hand-drawn picture inside his teepee. He was a true optimist. And he used to say, I only remember the good things in my life. I know I've had challenges, but I just can't remember them. He was always helping and always giving. And there's a story I'd like to tell you. I could tell you thousands of stories. But I was back east visiting my sister, and she reminded me of a really cute story that she told me. She was on the telephone with Matthew. And somewhere in the telephone, she had just briefly, off the cuff, mentioned that she was feeling a little down in the dumps. Well, 1 week later, she had a box that arrived on her doorstep filled with what she describes as a lifetime supply of pharmaceuticals for depression. That is a true story. Well, Matthew was a very, very wealthy man. And we can't deny that. But he was a regular, down-to-earth kind of guy. He loved his $10 watch. And he would get very excited when Arby's would have their 5 for $5. He told me a cute story I'd like to share with you. He had this big business meeting, and he sat at the head of this large table, and he looked down at the table at the rows of businessmen and businesswomen, and he noticed that the men were wearing very expensive suits. And he had guessed maybe they were worth $1,000, $2,000 for these suits. So he started the business meeting by standing up and asking everybody, do you like my shirt? Does everyone like my shirt? Of course, everyone said yes, because he was the boss and they wanted to keep their jobs. But then he went on to brag that he had bought his shirt on sale for $5. Sure, those guys in $2,000 business suits were a little jealous. Who's big business guy here. I want to read something that he has written. The natural condition of our spiritual being is love. Love is all-inclusive. Our several and separate existences live within the oneness of love. We are all part of one great spiritual heart. When we act with love, we feel no separation of self or others. The dancer and the dance become one, effortlessly moving in perfect rhythm. All that exists in the moment of love is pure agency, true balance, and timeless freedom. Well, I would like to say that everything was always perfect between Matthew and I. But we could push each other's buttons. Has anyone here ever been in a relationship where it brought up some stuff? Usually what I get is a laugh and no hands come up. Or one or two. It's pretty difficult to not have anything come up in a relationship. Relationships sometimes bring up stuff. Life brings up stuff. Being a spiritual person doesn't mean we don't have any stuff. It means that we're on a compassionate journey to heal that stuff. Well, Matthew was much better at dealing with upset than me. If I got upset, he never abandoned me. He might have also gotten upset. But he always stayed with me until we worked it all out. I can see him now, smiling at me, telling me how cute I am when my red hair catches on fire. Unfortunately, I was not always as generous with him. And oftentimes when he would get upset, I would run away like a scared rabbit. And one such time, I was driving home, asking myself, how did I attract this reactive man into my life? It's funny to me now because there are no accidents and we always draw to us our perfect mirror. But we don't always like what we see in the mirror. So I was driving home blind to the projection that he was so kindly reflecting back to me. unaware that running off in a tizzy, withholding my love and shutting him out was actually a huge reaction. So I got home that day and I spoke to my daughter, and she reminded me of what I had been telling her and her brother their entire life. That those who seem the least lovable need the most love. And that people can only be either one of two things. Either loving or calling for love. I had completely forgotten to practice what I had been preaching my entire life. And with this man I was so in love with. So I called him up right away. And I apologized. I promised him that I would never run away again. Maybe into the next room. But never very far, and never for very long. I grew up that day. I made a commitment to myself to be present and non-reactive even when someone is upset with me. Even if someone runs away from me, no matter how they react, I can be present and non-reactive. And I'm still practicing that today. I practice shifting from being the defensive child who blames and faults to being the adult who responds to a call for love with compassion. I need to look at my pictures. Oh, yes, yes. So when someone we love passes, all those pet peeves, all those little annoying things that annoyed us, they actually become endearing. You see, nothing's changed except our interpretation. That's it. One of the things that used to bother me about Matthew was how bold he was. This man was unstoppable. If we were driving down the road and he wanted to make a U-turn, the medium strip was only there to assist him. We traveled a lot, and I remember being in airports. And if he had a question, he would march right up to the customer service agent, completely ignoring the people waiting patiently for their turn. He owned a piece of property alongside a mountain, and he loved to drive me up his mountain. And if he saw someone hiking on his four-wheel drive dirt road, he'd always let them hike, but he'd always stop just to let them know that they were trekking on his territory. When I would see hikers up ahead, I would say silently to myself, please don't stop. Keep going. Please don't stop. He would always stop, roll down his window. I'd sink down in my seat just a little bit with embarrassment. Today, what I would give to have another ride up that mountain with him. I wouldn't care how many times he stopped. Of all our grand and wonderful adventures, his greatest gift to me was in his passing. I learned so much by losing his physical form. I learned that you can never really lose anyone. I learned that to love and accept the people in my life exactly as they are. I don't need to change people anymore. You see, I know that if I lost them, I would miss everything about them. I don't take the people in my life for granted. I learned to forgive more easily. It's only the interpretation of what is said or done that can offend or hurt us. And it is always easy to forgive a call for love. I still worry. And I know that I cannot worry and simultaneously believe that all is in divine right order. Those two thought systems cannot coexist. But I worry a little less since Matthew, because the abundance of synchronicities that weave themselves into our experiences have helped me to shift from believing in a chaotic universe, a fearful and chaotic universe, where I have to force and control outcomes, to believing in a universe that is divinely orchestrated, where I am guided moment by moment, as I trust, unattached, and I'm free. And I watch as my life unfolds miraculously before my eyes. I've learned that you really cannot ever lose anyone, that the soul is eternal. I had learned that and read that way since I was young, thousands of times. But then to have a very real experience with Matthew after he passed, to feel him with me, to feel that connection, to feel his love surround me and his presence, transform that mere belief into a deep inner knowing. Everything in this physical universe will someday be gone. And Jim has not gone. He lives inside my heart, forever inside my heart. The love that is shared between souls is eternal. It is the only thing that lasts forever. Everything in this physical universe will be gone. The mountains up there, the houses, our cars, our physical bodies, even our cute dresses. They're going to all be gone. Maybe in a year, maybe in 1 trillion years. But this has helped me to value more deeply that which is eternal. The loving, invisible bonds from my heart to yours. The relationships in my life. While also being more physically present in the moment to the importance of that which is physically in front of me right here, right now, because it could be gone tomorrow. You see, when someone you love dies, at first it feels like you too have died. It feels like a piece of your soul is gone, missing. But then eventually, and more important, inevitably, you come back. And to be so blessed to have the experience that something that felt so painful and so devastating hasn't destroyed or altered the truth within you one iota. It's like opening up the floodgates of your soul where you become alive and freer than ever before. You realize you have a choice with everything in life. Whether you lose someone through death, whether it's a difficult breakup, whether you lose your home or your job or even your health, whether you've been victimized, persecuted, or any of that, you can choose to allow that pain and allow that grief to close you down, to harden you. And you can become a resigned, guarded, and bitter human being. Or you can choose to allow that pain and allow that grief to open you up. And you can become, to soften you. You can become a kinder, more sensitive, more forgiving and understanding, bold and compassionate, joyful and passionate human being. I have loved, and I have lost, and I have grieved, and I am still here, happier and more alive than ever before. And maybe after all, life does have a perfect design. And all those experiences from when we were little that hurt us and closed us down, that made us feel unloved, insecure, afraid, victimized, can deepen and enrich who we are. Maybe those experiences can help us to come around full circle. And we can become again like little children. as our wide open hearts, fully self-expressed, dance and play upon this planet in a state of wonder and grace. Yet now, as wise, compassionate, loving, empowered, authentic adults. Matthew taught me the greatest lesson of all, that my happiness and my security didn't come from him. Our happiness and our security dwell within each and every one of us. They are ever present, and it is an infinite supply. And nothing in this temporary physical world can diminish or change that holy, pure, infinitely powerful essence that we are. Nothing can threaten the all-loving, permanent, divine magnificence that you truly and eternally are. Thank you. So we have 15 more minutes, so we can either do questions or I can talk a little bit about another book that I've written. Start with questions?
Yes, please. Mm-hmm. Did you teach Matthew to be empowered and introduce him to the thought process that he so beautifully wrote? Or was it the other way around?
We both gave each other enormous gifts.
So he was already on that path.
He was
he met you.
He was on that path already. He was on the spiritual path. He also was associated with his religion, but he'd also dabbled in things like Course in Miracles and Science of Mind, and so he had that same thought system. I think taking a lot of my classes kind of opened that up a little more for him and deepened it, and a deepening and helped him kind of get out of his box that he was already kind of out of personally, but not in writing. So
I recognized the Course in Miracles quote in what you said. And
yes, there is a Course in Miracles. Yes.
Love.
Yes. Thank you. That's an excellent question. Is there any other questions? Oh, yeah. Any other questions?
How long ago did he pass?
He passed in, it was 5 years ago, so it was 08, January 08. So it's been.
And you embraced that at the time, or you went through maybe a catharsis of processing that, or?
It started like with any relationship. You go through a healing process. You go through a growth. You go through. So it started from the moment I met him, and then when he passed, that was a whole new growth, a whole new process. So it was like two big processes together of awakening. You know, because the dying inside, and then the awakening again, and coming back to life, and realizing that that was one of the greatest gifts he gave me, because when you before he passed, I was afraid to get really close to anybody. I didn't want to get hurt. I thought that actually too much pain would destroy me. I mean, probably from those experiences I told you about when I was little. You know, I wanted to protect myself. So there was some armor around my heart, and so that armor around my heart. And then to have fallen so deeply in love, you automatically, the armor comes off. You can't help it. That does happen. And you're vulnerable again to getting hurt. And for me to get hurt so deeply and to be so vulnerable and to have that experience, and then to realize through the grief that it didn't kill me. It didn't destroy me. I'm still here. I mean, I really thought like that much grief would kill me. So I didn't. Now I know that I don't have to protect myself anymore. I don't. I mean, I think sometimes it's kind of a reaction, but I don't do it anymore. I can get closer to people. I can be vulnerable. That's a gift that his passing taught me, to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to get hurt, and it won't kill me. It won't destroy me. What I am is not destroyable. So that's a really, really good question. And there was something else in your question that I don't know if I addressed the whole thing.
The process that actually you did. I asked when he passed, and then what you went through, you said it was this process of knowing that you didn't die after losing somebody you loved so deeply.
Yes, and one of the keys to that process for me was when he passed. I started grieving before he passed because he was sick with cancer, and I knew he was going, even though I didn't want to admit it. So I started grieving very deeply before he passed. And I said to myself, very consciously said to myself, I'm not going to let this close me down. I am going to feel everything fully. I'm going to feel it all. I'm going to let myself experience it, and I am going to let this grief open me up. I'm going to let it make me a better, more deeply feeling human being. And I consciously said that to myself. So there was times where even before he left, I would just be sobbing. I just it would come up. And I would just let myself cry. I let myself sob. I let it all come through me. And it deepened me. And in those moments, because I didn't resist, sometimes that grief, the sobbing, was actually joyful. It was actually kind of blissful. Because I didn't hold anything back. It's the resistance. When you're resisting those emotions, that it becomes painful. And because I didn't resist anything, and I just said, bring it on. So when it would come up, I'd lie on the floor and I'd sob, I'd be in bed and sob, I'd pull over on the side of the road and sob, and I just let it all come up. I didn't let anything go, and I consciously knew. I mean, we see people when they're older. You see old people, and you see there are people, older people, that are way open. And their eyes sparkle, and they've softened, and they're like magical to be around. They're beautiful, and they're fun, and they're just the best. But then you do see people that are older that are, cranky, resigned, complaining people that have really closed down. They've let life harden them.
So at this point, do you think now that you don't fear death, or you do fear death?
I've never feared death. I've never feared death. Even as a child, I thought I was going to die. I was sure I was going to die. I'm positive. And I had no fear of death. I don't know why. Kind of looking forward. It was just no fear of it. But what I fear in death is the people around me. I don't want them to feel hurt. That's what I fear in death, is when I was a little girl, I worried about my mom and dad missing me or being sad that I would be gone. And I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm going to die. I was maybe about 8 years old, 9 years old. I said, I'm going to die. I just want to let you know. And I want you and Mom to know that I'm going to be okay. Just don't worry about me. I'm going to be good. I don't want you to worry about me. And I didn't die, obviously, but my dad did tell me that I was going to live to 102, so which was nice. Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to compare it to in your life experience, Ananda, but you've experienced someone dying, shall we say, slowly.
Yes.
And you had warning.
Yes.
Have you spoken with or consoled people who had the experience, or maybe you've had it in your own life where someone died suddenly, and what do you experience as the difference between the two, or is there any? Is the grieving process different? Do you know?
I have not had that experience of someone really deeply close to me. I have had experience of that happening, people that were removed a little bit, but I think the grieving process is different when it's someone who's very intimately close to you, like your children, your parents, a significant other, than when it's someone who's a little bit removed. So I wouldn't be able to consult anybody for that. But it's a great question. But yes.
When you had when Matthew was afflicted with the cancer, I'd be interested to know how long that was before he passed away, and also what kind of challenges was he resigned to? Oh, for me, was it let's beat this thing?
Very good question. Okay, very good question. So Matthew got the cancer. He went through radiation and he started feeling better. And in my positive outlook, he's, you know, great. But I didn't know that the cancer actually hadn't gone away. He may have, but he never let on. But it went through a slow process, and even as he was going through very severe struggles, and I remember some very severe physical struggles, this man always had a smile on his face. Always. And it talks about that in the book. And it gives a very detailed description of a very painful situation where you would never know. You meet him, and he was, like I said, an eternal optimist. An eternal optimist. So he was always smiling. He was never complaining, even when he was days away from passing. And I know that he gathered up every ounce of strength he had just to make the one phone call a day that I would get. This is all in the book. Every day, he would gather up that energy. And when he called me, you couldn't tell that he was sick and dying within days, because he sounded just like his usual optimistic, cheerful self. So it's a really good question.
What lessons did he teach you about money?
You know, that is a really good question. That's a really good question. So, you know what he used to say? He used to say brick by brick. Brick by brick. And I would say, oh, come on, just forget that brick by brick, you know, abundance, just go for it, boom, you know. And, you know, he was right. He was right. It's patience, and it's brick by brick. And that's how he grew up very, very poor. He grew up very poor. He went to bed hungry many nights. The hungry belly. Sometimes they would have bread and milk for dinner because they couldn't afford anything else. He started working when he was really, really young, doing any kind of job he could think of. You know, he delivered paper, he picked walnuts, he did everything. He would sneak into places and pretend he was older than he was to get jobs. But he did everything he did, and the billions that he accumulated was really and truly brick by brick. It was down to earth, solid sense, and he didn't waste. He wasn't a wasteful. He was generous, but he wasn't the kind of person that, he loved Arby's 5 for $5. He went through McDonald's and got Happy Meals. I mean, it was the cutest thing, you know, he really would. Get me a Happy Meal. He didn't waste. He didn't spend things that he didn't need to. And he used to work, and he used this too. There was so many cute stories, like he had a mission, and everyone was going to be flying or busing home. Well, he purchased a car for a very little amount. He got 4 people to drive home with him to give him more money than what the car cost him. They all drove home. The car was paid for, plus a little extra. Then he still had a car. Yeah. He was not stupid, you know, he was smart. So he used those things. When he started working, he instead of taking the plane and the hotel, all that stuff, he used to take a bus and buy a pillow. Or, you know, so he actually taught me to be more common sense.
The ideas that he had about money that eventually brought to him the billions, were those ideas that were, shall we say, line upon line, precept upon precept? Were they one little brick and then the next little brick and the next little brick and had a cumulative effect, or did he have one big strike ever along the way?
It was all little, you know.
All little things.
Well, it was just, it all accumulated and accumulated, and he learned lessons. Like, he had made an investment and he had not kept it there. And it had grown. So then he had the opportunity to make another investment, and he actually kept it there, and it really grew. So he learned from past experiences, and he used his mind. Yeah.
What brought you two together, and how did you meet, and for how long ago?
That's all in the book. I can't give away too much, or no one's going to buy a book. Every little detail of how we met is in the book.
$10 question.
Every little detail. But the bottom line is, our souls brought us together. And when you have a soul connection with someone, nothing can keep you apart. You see, we were very unlikely match. We grew up on opposite ends of the. He was in California, I was in Massachusetts. Our ages were different. Our culture, our religion, everything. You wouldn't think in a million years the two of us would have met, or ever been in a relationship, for that matter.
But it's chemistry and it's meant to be, it's all right.
Yeah, I mean, it's the synchronicity. It's back to the synchronicity. Is it a chaotic and accidental, haphazard universe? Or is this a divinely orchestrated universe where if you're meant to find someone, if you're meant to have an experience for someone for however long that is, if you have a soul connection, what brings you together? It's the soul connection. It's the magnetics of the invisible bonds that bring you together. That soul connection. So that's the underlying, but the juicy details are in the book.
They're in the book.
Yeah. And we wouldn't have time to go through all the details.
I'll bet it's a cute story.
It's an endearing story. It's very endearing. Yeah. Any other questions? These have been wonderful, great questions. Someone had their hand up somewhere. Yeah?
What's your favorite part of the story?
That is a really good question. My favorite part of the story, I haven't even thought about that. Let me think for a minute. I'm one of those slow thinkers, in a couple hours I'll think of the most profound thing that I could have really thought, but right off the cuff.
Go ahead and answer other questions.
But no, let me think for a minute. Okay, one of my favorite stories in the story was his birthday, and on his birthday, we asked him some questions, and my kids and I videotaped him. It was a significant birthday, and one of his questions just blew me away, and that was a really cool experience. But I think the moment I met him, when I never in a million years would have thought that I would have a relationship with him. And the profoundness of the mind and the heart, and how the mind can tell you one thing, but then the heart and the soul connection can tell you another thing. And over time and getting to know somebody and feeling that love, that really, truly, what always rules everything is your heart. And that the heart will overrule everything. It will win over the mind. And I talk about that a little in the book. So I think that's probably the best, but I can't think of one exact incident. It's all very good. It's all really, really good. So
Good answer.
yeah.
Let's give Bonnie a big hand.
What's your
I was just
question?
going to ask you, how long did it take to write the book?
Oh, that's a good question. I started writing it maybe a year after he passed.
And you just finished it?
I just, it's been sitting on my computer for several years, and I actually had this talk at Toastmasters, and then this talk actually propelled me to publish it. So good question. Thank you. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And if you want, I'm selling books out in the hallway, so if anyone would like to buy a book, they're $10.